Let us know where you're tuning in from today, and if you enjoy this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you never miss one of our true crime dramas. Malcolm Gaines stepped onto the deserted platform of Crest Hill subway station just after 10:00 p.m. His orange vest and polished name badge gleaming beneath the stark corridor lights. At 45, he'd spent more nights than he cared to remember manning the graveyard shift here. Yet each evening felt like stepping into a different world, a world where the hum of distant trains and the echo of footsteps could be as unnerving as the roar of a crowd. Tonight, however, held a different energy. Earlier that day, his supervisor had warned him about the post-concert rush from Crest Hill Stadium, where 10,000 music fans would be spilling out onto the streets in roughly 15 minutes, all night, funneling down to this very station in search of the last train home. After clocking in and checking his radio, Malcolm left the quiet staff room behind and took up position just behind the yellow safety line at Platform 1. He straightened his vest, inhaled the crisp, antiseptic scent of the station, and scanned the tracks. Already, pockets of concert-goers were trickling in, teenagers clutching glow sticks, groups of friends still buzzing from the final encore, couples leaning into each other as though the night would never end. The platform, usually characterized by an eerie hush after midnight, was now charged with laughter, chatter, and the gentle scrape of luggage wheels. Malcolm's throat felt dry as he raised his voice again. "Please step back from the platform edge. Stand clear." He repeated it dozens of times as he answered queries about connecting lines, all while keeping a watchful eye on the growing mass of humanity. When the station speakers crackled and announced the arrival of the 10:15 train, Malcolm felt a familiar tremor of anticipation. A train's approach always came with a pulse he could feel through the thick-soled shoes on his feet. Salt and metal aromas lingered in the air as the train's headlights emerged from the tunnel, and then came the low rumble that resonated in his bones. When the doors hissed open, most cars were surprisingly empty, a fact that provided a brief sigh of relief. Less crowding, fewer trips and falls, a smoother set of embarkations. He crouched to help an elderly woman in a wheelchair navigate the gap, offering a steady hand as she edged forward. It was in that brief, heartbeat-long pause that he saw her, a small, trembling figure no more than 8 or 9 years old, clad in a pale blue hospital gown far too large, her feet bare against the cold, tiled floor. Clutched in her arms was a tiny bundle, wrapped so tightly in white cloth that he could just make out the shape of a fragile newborn beneath. His heart lurched as he watched her stumble from the train car, darting into the press of passengers like a minnow slipping through the school. No adult followed. No nurse or frantic relative emerged to claim her. The sight felt like a dream at first, or a terrible hallucination. His instinct screamed at him to drop everything and chase after her, but the platform teemed with concert-goers jostling for space, each step fraught with the risk of trampling a child or causing a panic. Duty anchored him to his post, the responsibility for hundreds of lives outweighing the desperate need to sprint after that lone, frightened child. Maintaining calm, Malcolm raised his radio to his lips, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill in the air. "Security, this is Platform 1. Be advised, a young female child, approximately 8 years old, wearing what appears to be a hospital gown, just exited the 10:15 train, carrying what looks like an infant swaddled in a white blanket. No adult in sight. Please respond with instructions and send help immediately." A moment of static droned on before a crackling voice returned. "Platform 1, this is security. Negative sightings so far. Confirm your location and provide any additional details." Malcolm relayed his exact coordinates, described the girl's pale gown, the baby's feeble whimpers he could almost hear, and emphasized that time was of the essence. As he spoke, the train doors slid shut, and the crowd's momentum began to shift. Some passengers boarding, most still exiting, unaware of the drama unfolding within their midst. Swallowing hard, he scanned the throng with hawk-like focus, eyes darting from one face to the next, heart pounding with the urgency of the unknown. Was the girl running from danger? Had she escaped some horrific scenario mere minutes ago? The thought that this child and her newborn sibling had traveled alone through the night, across city blocks, and onto this platform haunted him. Every second felt like an eternity as he balanced his duty to keep the platform safe for the partying masses with his growing dread for the two most vulnerable souls he had ever encountered. And as the railway's fluorescent glare cast sinister shadows across the station walls, Malcolm Gaines stood vigilant, determined not to let them slip away into the underbelly of the city's bone-chilling midnight. He sprinted across the concourse, heart hammering in his ears, and reached the second restroom nestled beside the exit doors. The lights here were just as unforgiving, flickering as if reluctant to stay on. A line of commuters lingered nearby, stamping their feet against the chill of the tiled floor, unaware of the crisis unfolding just through the door. Malcolm paused to steady himself, pressing a hand to the cool wall for support, then steeled his nerves and gently pulled the door open. The sudden hush inside was jarring. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale perfume, the soft echo of dripping water creating a strange, tense symphony. "Security!" he called, voice low but urgent. "Is anyone in here? I need assistance. There's a child in danger." He edged forward, scanning row after row of stalls until he spotted a flash of pale blue fabric bunched at the foot of the farthest cubicle. With a quick apology, this time internal, he slipped inside the corridor of stalls. Through the thin gap beneath the door, he could hear muffled sobs and the unmistakable, fragile cry of a newborn. "Please, miss, are you all right?" he said gently, reaching for the lock. His badge gleamed in the dim light as he clicked it open, praying he wasn't too late. The door swung inward, and there she was, the little girl crumpled against the far wall, knees drawn tight to her chest, the tiny infant nestled in her arms, blanket damp with tears. Her eyes widened in fear when she saw him. The baby's wail spiked into a desperate crescendo. Malcolm dropped to his knees, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "It's okay. I'm here to help. You're safe now." He kept his voice calm, lifting the baby in a gentle motion and cradling the bundle to shield it from view. Behind him, footsteps thundered as two uniformed officers burst through the door, followed moments later by a female station attendant carrying fresh towels and a worried frown. One officer knelt beside Malcolm, taking the infant with gloved hands to examine its condition. The other stood protectively between the girl and the restroom door, offering a hand to help her up. Malcolm sank back against the wall, relief flooding him, until he noticed a man pushing through the gathering crowd, face ashen, eyes wild with panic. He wore a doctor's coat, limp over his shoulders, stethoscope swinging at his side. He froze when he saw the girl, and then his expression crumbled into heartbreak. "She's my daughter," he whispered hoarsely, voice breaking. I thought I'd lost her when the elevator doors closed at the hospital. I came straight here." He reached out a trembling hand, and the girl recoiled slightly, eyes darting between him and Malcolm as though unsure whom to trust. The father's gaze flicked to the baby in the officer's arms, recognition dawning in horror. "That's my son, my newborn," he choked. I can't believe this is happening." The officers exchanged glances, and one radioed for medical backup, while the other gently led father and daughter outside the restroom into the open concourse. Malcolm rose unsteadily, watching as the family was guided to a quieter corner of the station. The infant's cries had softened to little hiccuping sobs, and the girl's shoulders trembled as she finally stood upright, clutching her father's coat. Around them, the world seemed to slow. The incessant chatter of the crowd dimmed, the screech of arriving trains faded, leaving only the gentle coo of the baby and the soft murmur of concern from the officers and attendant. Malcolm took a deep breath, letting the tension drain from his limbs, grateful that his split-second decision to leave the platform had led him here, to this moment of fragile reunion. As EMTs arrived and the family was escorted to a medical room nearby for checks, Malcolm returned to the platform. The digital display blinked 10:40 p.m., announcing the next train in 5 minutes. He straightened his vest one last time, adjusted his name tag, and resumed his post, a little more shaken, a lot more aware that sometimes the most extraordinary stories unfold in the most ordinary places. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss one of our true crime dramas. After sending out his radio alert and dialing 911, Malcolm slipped away from the bustling platform and climbed the stairs to the station's upper level. Here, the din below was muted, as though the station itself was holding its breath. Fewer people milled about, their footsteps and conversations softened by distance and thick concrete. An eerie hush wrapped the corridor in a strange stillness, punctuated only by the distant rumble of trains and the hum of flickering fluorescent lights. Malcolm paused outside the row of restrooms, recalling the inebriated woman's warning about a bathroom upstairs. Remembering protocol, he rapped gently on the door of the first stall area and called out, "Hello? Subway security. Is anyone inside? I'm looking for a lost child." Silence answered him at first. Then, a soft, muffled sob drifted from the far corner near the sinks. His chest tightened. Footsteps ringing hollow against the tile floor, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. At the countertop lay a crumpled white blanket, damp and stained where the baby's meconium had seeped through, a pungent, sour scent that made Malcolm's stomach churn. Beneath the sink, tucked into the narrow crawl space, was the girl. She was curled into herself, knees drawn up, arms wrapped protectively around a newborn. Her hospital gown hung loose on her thin frame, and her bare feet rested on cold tile. She trembled so violently, her knuckles went white against the soft blanket. Malcolm closed the door gently behind him and took a careful step forward, phone still pressed to his ear. On the other end, the dispatcher's calm voice was asking for details. He spoke quietly, never taking his eyes off the child. "This is Malcolm Gaines at Crest Hill. I have an approximately 9-year-old female in a railway restroom under the sink area, holding an infant. The baby's diaper is saturated. We need medics and police here immediately. I believe she came from Crest Hill General. She got off the 10:15 train." A pause, then the dispatcher. "Units are en route, sir. Can you stay with her and keep her calm?" Malcolm swallowed, then ended the call. He set his phone aside and raised his hands, palms outward, to show he came in peace. He crouched down to her level. "Hey there," he said softly. "My name's Malcolm. You're safe now. Help is on the way." The girl's wide, terrified eyes flicked up to him. She hugged the baby tighter, rocking gently. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Malcolm gently asked, "What's your name?" Her voice was a mere whisper. "Lena. Lena Brooks." "That's a beautiful name," he replied, offering a small, reassuring smile. He glanced around to make sure no one else was inside. "How old are you, Lena?" "9, she murmured, tears spilling down her cheeks. Malcolm's heart sank. He'd read reports of 9-year-olds giving birth, but to see it felt like a blow. He forced himself to stay focused. "Where did you get the baby, Lena?" he asked calmly, so as not to frighten her further. Words caught in her throat. She shook her head. I don't know," she choked out. "I just found him." She stared at the infant's wet diaper. "I don't have any milk, and he's so cold." Malcolm nodded. "Okay, you did the right thing coming here. I'm going to help you get him warm." He rose carefully, moving to retrieve his jacket. But then his gaze fell on a piece of paper peeking out beneath the blanket on the countertop. He reached for it gently. There was a damp, folded birth record, smudged but still legible. He opened it and read. The baby's name was Monica Brooks, born at 2:17 p.m. that day, weighing 6 pounds, 4 ounces. The hospital seal confirmed it was genuine. He slipped the document into his vest pocket, determined to hand it to the arriving officers. Before he could say more, the restroom door creaked open. Heads turned in alarm as two uniformed police officers stepped inside, followed by an EMT carrying a small medical kit. The room filled with a flurry of motion. The officers moved to secure the scene, and the medic knelt beside Lena, checking her pulse and drawing a blanket over her shoulders. One officer addressed Malcolm, voice low but firm. "Mr. Gaines, you did the right thing calling us. Can you step outside and give us the full report?" Malcolm stood, relief flooding him. He glanced back at Lena, now cradled in the paramedic's arms, Monica nestled against her chest under a fresh blanket. The infant's little face scrunched in a contented sigh. Lena's eyes closed briefly, exhaustion winning over fear. "As soon as I'm clear," Malcolm replied. He turned to follow the officer out into the hallway, ready to explain everything he'd witnessed, from the platform chaos to this quiet, urgent rescue under the flickering lights above a subway station that would, tonight, become the site of one of Crest Hill's most astonishing and heartbreaking stories. Margaret Steele, Malcolm's station manager, hurried up the stairs behind the two officers and the stranger. As she pushed into the cramped restroom, her eyes widened in shock at the sight before her. Officer Johnson and Officer Chen standing guard, Lena pressed against the wall, and the man, Martin Brooks, hovering just behind the police. The air felt instantly thick with tension. Lena flinched when she saw him, shrinking further into the corner. Malcolm noticed the flicker of fear in her eyes and felt his stomach twist in worry. Officer Johnson stepped forward, badge catching the glare of the overhead fluorescent lights. "I'm Officer Johnson," he introduced calmly, "and this is my partner, Officer Chen." He gestured toward the woman beside him, whose expression was steady but alert. Then he turned to Martin Brooks. "And you are?" Martin released a tight breath and attempted a wan smile. "Martin Brooks," he said, his voice quivering with relief as his gaze fell on Lena. He moved to wrap an arm around her and reach for the infant in the paramedic's arms, but the tenderness Malcolm expected in a father's eyes was nowhere to be found. Instead, Martin's grip on Lena's arm was too firm, his movements hurried, lacking the warmth of genuine concern. Officer Chen noticed it as well. She stepped forward, her tone crisp. "Mr. Brooks, we still need to take formal statements before you leave. This restroom needs to be secured as part of our investigation." Her hand rested casually on her radio, an unspoken reminder that she was in charge here. Martin's relief curdled into annoyance. He squared his shoulders and forced his face back into an expression of a worried dad. "Officer," he said, clipped and defensive, "this isn't a crime scene. My daughter got frightened. She ran away from the hospital. She's safe now. There's nothing more to it." Margaret's jaw tightened. She glanced at Malcolm, who bristled at the father's dismissive tone. He cleared his throat. "Sir," Malcolm interjected, "there's a blanket over there in the sink, soaked through. That alone means we need to know what happened." Lena looked terrified when she ran out of the train. "This isn't simply a runaway. Something is off." Officer Johnson glanced at the crumpled blanket, then back at Martin. The blanket was indeed soaked, though the baby and Lena appeared unharmed. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mr. Brooks, we've examined both of them. No injuries, no immediate medical concerns. Your daughter is safe, and the baby is fine. We understand that she got excited to see her new sibling and ran off, but standard procedure requires we confirm everything. We'll walk you and your family back to Crest Hill General now. Your wife is undoubtedly frantic." Martin's face darkened with irritation, but he nodded stiffly. "Fine," he spat, turning toward Lena. He reached for her arm again, this time with feigned gentleness. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home." As the family moved toward the door, Officer Chen gave Malcolm a curt nod. "Thank you, Mr. Gaines. You can stand down now." Officer Johnson patted Malcolm on the shoulder. "You did the right thing calling us." But as Martin guided Lena and the infant toward the exit, Malcolm's unease deepened. That final glimpse of anger, No, fury in Martin's eyes as he passed Malcolm by had sent a chill through him. Something about the way Martin had brushed him aside, the harshness of "mind your position, clerk," replayed in Malcolm's mind. Margaret fell in beside Malcolm as the officers and family descended the stairs. The corridor felt oppressively silent now, the echo of their footsteps the only sound. "Malcolm," she said quietly, slipping her hand onto his arm, "you did everything right. The police confirmed the identities. Mr. Brooks is the father. It's time to let it go." Malcolm forced himself to take a steadying breath. "I know what the police said," he murmured, "but seeing the way Mr. Brooks held her, hearing the contempt in his voice, I keep thinking about Lena's face when she saw him. If this really is her father, why did she flinch? Why did she look like she wanted to run?" Margaret's lips pressed together. "Children can be shy around new babies," she offered gently. "Or maybe it's just the shock of the whole night." He shook his head, unconvinced. No, she was terrified. And the way he grabbed her, too tight, too forceful. It didn't feel like concern. It felt like control. Margaret glanced at the departing family. Martin led Lena down the corridor, her shoulders hunched, head bowed. The baby, now swaddled in a clean blanket, rested in the mother's arms. They seemed polite enough, but the tension crackling around Martin's broad shoulders made Malcolm's fingers tighten into fists. Officer Johnson returned, lowering his voice so only Malcolm could hear. "Look, we've done our part. If you still have concerns, you can file a report at the station. But we're under orders to close this incident." Malcolm looked to Margaret, who nodded faintly, permission to keep his mouth shut for now. He exhaled, the knot in his chest refusing to ease. "Understood, officer." As the officers and the Brooks family exited Crest Hill Station, Malcolm and Margaret stood alone in the doorway of the now empty restroom. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting the tiled walls in stark, unforgiving relief. The echo of departing footsteps faded, leaving behind only the hum of the station and Malcolm's relentless questions. Had he done enough? Or was he about to watch a terrified girl slip back into a situation far worse than running away? He turned to Margaret, voice barely above a whisper. "Something's wrong. I can't shake it." Margaret's eyes were sympathetic but firm. "We'll watch the footage. If anything else happens, we'll be ready." Malcolm nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. As he stepped back onto the platform, the usual bustle felt oddly distant. Tonight, Crest Hill Station had become more than a stop on the map. It was the scene of a mystery he couldn't ignore, and he'd be damned if he let it slip away. The harsh clang of the arriving train dragged Malcolm's attention back to the present. Platform 1's edge vibrated beneath his feet as the screeching doors slid open, releasing the last wave of concert-goers into the night. He straightened his vest, forcing himself to refocus on crowd control, but his mind stubbornly circled back to Lena Brooks and the infant she'd carried through the station. He guided a young couple past the yellow line, murmuring, "Please step back, folks," while scanning every face for a flash of pale blue. None of the passengers lurking in the residual crowd matched the image seared into his memory. No hospital gown, no tiny bundle. They were ghosts now, slipping into the city's veins just as the subway pulled away. Malcolm took a deep breath, reminding himself that he'd left his post for longer than protocol allowed. He'd breached procedure twice, first by leaving the platform, then by holding on to that birth record when officers and security staff had explicitly told him to drop it. Guilt prickled at his conscience, yet he felt no regret. Something inside him had ignited the moment he saw Lena tremble in that bathroom, and tossing aside his responsibilities felt like the only way to keep from crumbling under the weight of his own painful past. "Mr. Gaines," Margaret's voice crackled through his radio, firm but not unkind. "I need you back at the ticket booth in 5 minutes. We've got a surge of passengers coming in from the late-night theater crowd." "I'm on my way," he replied, stowing the radio on his belt and casting a last glance down the empty tracks. Then, As officers had carried baby Monica and her sister back to Crest Hill General, he'd tucked the birth certificate safely back into his vest pocket, proof that he wasn't hallucinating, that this wasn't some twisted prank. He turned and made his way through the thinning mass of passengers, nodding at familiar faces, stepping aside for those rushing to catch the 11:45 p.m. departure. Each polite "thank you" and "excuse me" felt like an echo in his skull, reminding him that life here carried on, oblivious to the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. At the ticket booth, harsh fluorescent lights cast stencil-like shadows across the rows of empty seats. Malcolm slid behind the counter with a tired sigh, picking up the headset and flipping the switch. The usual questions spilled out. Is the next train still on time? Does this ticket work for the express? Each inquiry grounded him, but even as he answered them, his eyes kept drifting toward CCTV monitors mounted on the wall. There, in grainy black and white, he could see the platform, the stairs, and the corridor leading up to the restrooms. Something urged him to search the footage, to rewind the moments before Lena appeared. Maybe there'd be a clue. Someone forcing her onto the train, an unfamiliar figure tethering her to the newborn, a glimpse of despair in her trembling hands. But he knew he'd need permission, and Margaret was already breathing down his neck to process tickets for arriving passengers. A pager buzzed at his hip. Station maintenance. He answered curtly, directing them to clear a fallen sign near the stairs. His heart pounded so hard he thought they'd hear it through the phone. When he hung up, the monitors flickered, and one in particular caught his eye. The view outside the east exit, where dusk still clung to the sky. He squinted at a dark sedan idling at the curb, license plate unreadable in the grainy feed. Was that the car Martin Brooks had driven? He couldn't recall seeing any vehicle, only that Martin had stormed off toward River Street. Time blurred as he guided late arrivals onto the right lines and steered families toward their platforms. Over the station's PA, the final departure warnings chimed in monotone. Last train to North Terminal departing now. Last train to South District departing in 5 minutes. Please stand clear. At midnight, when the station emptied and the lights dimmed, Malcolm finally stole a moment alone. He ducked behind the booth and opened the drawer, retrieving the birth record. Under the yellow haze of a backlight, he unfolded it, reading Monica Brooks's name and birth details once more. His gloved fingertips traced the faint hospital seal. If anything were wrong, if Lena had been abused, coerced, or forced to bear this child, this document would be vital evidence. Clicking off the booth's lights, Malcolm pocketed the paper and slipped toward the security office. He paused at the door, hand hovering over the handle. Inside, cameras blinked at him, and a wall of screens awaited his scrutiny. The rhythm of his heartbeat synced with the soft hum of the surveillance system. He had to see what he'd missed. Taking a steadying breath, he pushed open the door. The station's CCTV operator looked up, eyebrows arching in surprise. "Malcolm?" she asked. He gave a tight nod. "I need to pull footage from Platform 1, from 10:10 to 10:20 p.m., and the corridor outside the east restrooms." His voice was low but unwavering. "I believe there's more to what happened tonight." As the operator cued the footage, Malcolm leaned forward, eyes glued to the monitors. The digital clock above the screens ticked toward 12:15 a.m., and somewhere beyond the station's walls, two sisters, one just 9 years old, waited for the truth to be uncovered. Because sometimes, in the quiet hours after midnight, the most urgent stories unfold in shadows, and Malcolm Gaines was determined that this one would not be buried there. Malcolm cleared his throat and approached the information desk, the fluorescent hospital lights humming overhead, as if urging him on. The tired receptionist looked up, eyes bloodshot and weary, but managed a polite smile. "Good evening. How can I help you?" Malcolm swallowed, clutching his vest pocket as if it held all the answers. "I'm looking for a patient, Lena Brooks, and her newborn daughter, Monica," he said, forcing his voice to sound official. "They were brought in from the Crest Hill subway station a little while ago after a disturbance. He paused, realizing how it must sound. I'm a station employee. I have the baby's birth record that was left behind. I need to return it to her family." The receptionist's forehead creased in confusion. "Let me check," she replied, tapping at her computer. Malcolm glanced around the nearly empty lobby. A security guard by the entrance, a silent janitor pushing a cart down the hall, and the distant wail of a heart monitor on a corridor 2 floors up. He tried to steady his racing heart, reminding himself that this was the right thing to do, even if it meant trespassing after hours on duty. After a moment, the receptionist looked up again. "Yes, Miss Brooks and her baby are in room 318, 3rd floor east wing, but visiting hours ended an hour ago." She hesitated. "I can notify the nurse's station. Perhaps they'll allow you to leave the record with them." Malcolm nodded, relief and frustration melding into determination. "Thank you. I'll just—" He took a step toward the elevator bank, then stopped. "Actually, I need to see Ms. Brooks or speak with the nurse directly, if possible. It's urgent." "Sir," she said gently, lowering her voice so the guard wouldn't overhear, "I'm not sure they'll let you through." But before she could finish, the guard at the door strode over, spotting the uniform badge peeking from Malcolm's vest. "Evening," he said gruffly. "You're off duty, aren't you, Mr. Gaines? What brings you here?" Malcolm met his gaze, steeling himself. "I need to return this," he said, unfolding the birth record in a trembling hand. "It belongs to this baby and her mother. It's the only proof of her identity." The guard eyed the document skeptically, scanning the hospital stamp and the barely legible scrawl of the doctor's signature. He pocketed his walkie-talkie and said, "Follow me." Without another word, he led Malcolm to the elevator. The doors dinged shut as they ascended, and Malcolm's reflection stared back at him in the steel doors, pale, determined, haunted. On the 3rd floor, the guard guided him down a long hallway lined with private rooms. A nurse at the station glanced up, eyebrows rising when she saw Malcolm with a security officer. "Yes?" she asked. Malcolm stepped forward. "I'm Malcolm Gaines from Crest Hill Station. I have the birth record for Monica Brooks. Her mother and baby are in room 318. The nurse frowned, scanned the paper, and tapped it with her gloved finger. "This is valid," she admitted. "They've been asking for their documents. You can leave it here, or if you're the one who found it, you may give it to Ms. Brooks yourself." Malcolm exhaled, steadying himself for the final stretch. The nurse pointed down the corridor. "Room 318 is the 2nd door on the right. The patient's husband is with her, but I'll inform them you're here." He nodded solemnly and approached the door. As he stepped inside, the first thing he noticed was the soft, bluish glow of a baby monitor on the nightstand, the faint lullaby loop playing in the background. The room itself was quiet except for the soft whimpers of Monica and the stifled sobs of her mother, who lay propped on pillows in her hospital gown, and standing beside the bed, cradling Lena's hand, was Martin Brooks. His face was drawn, eyes red from worry, or something darker. When he saw Malcolm, his expression flickered between surprise and cold suspicion. "You again?" he spat, voice low enough that only Malcolm could hear. Martin turned toward Lena, squeezing her hand too tightly. Malcolm's pulse spiked as he remembered the way the girl had flinched in the station restroom. Clearing his throat, Malcolm held out the birth record. "This belongs to your daughter, and to Monica," he said quietly, not wanting to startle Lena. Martin's jaw clenched, but he accepted the paper without a word, sliding it into his coat pocket. The nurse hovered in the doorway, uneasy. "Thank you," Martin muttered, but his gratitude sounded forced. Malcolm glanced at Lena, who sat stiffly in bed, clutching her nightgown. She looked up at him with wide, tired eyes, and for a moment their gazes locked. He saw again the terror in her expression, still fresh after all this time. He swallowed hard, deciding he couldn't leave without at least trying to speak with her again. He bent closer, lowering his voice. "Lena, It's Malcolm from the subway station. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Martin stepped in front of him, blocking his path. She's fine, he hissed. Leave us alone. His grip on Lena's shoulder tightened so severely the girl winced. Malcolm's stomach churned. He forced himself to meet Martin's glare. I'm just making sure she's safe, he stammered. Safe? Martin echoed, amusement crossing his face. She's with her family. What more do you want? Malcolm's instinct screamed that Lena was anything but safe. He remembered the homeless woman's words about the surgical scar, the blank terror in the girl's eyes, Martin's possessive hold. He drew a steadying breath. If something's not right, I'll report it, he said, voice firm. I won't let her slip away. For a heartbeat, the room hung in tense silence. Then Lena raised a trembling hand, as if pleading for help, and whispered, Please! The single word, fragile and raw, broke the stalemate. Martin's face twisted with anger, but the nurse intervened, placing herself between them. Mr. Brooks, please let the patient rest, she admonished gently, turning Lena's attention to the baby monitor. Malcolm hesitated, torn between protocol and conscience. He knew that one more push, one more question, might snap this delicate balance in two. With a final glance at Lena's frightened face, he nodded curtly, stepping back. I understand. If you need anything, call security immediately. As he backed out of the room, passing through the silent corridor, Malcolm felt the weight of every unspoken truth pressed down on him. He had delivered the document, but he hadn't saved Lena. Not yet. And somewhere deep inside, he vowed he wouldn't rest until he was certain that Martin Brooks truly was the girl's protector and not her captor. In the hush of Crest Hill General, beyond the glow of monitors and the soft breaths of sleeping infants, his mission had only just begun. The hospital corridor pulsed with a sudden tension as Martin's enraged shout echoed off the walls. Malcolm remained rooted before him, heart hammering, shielding Lena with a steadying hand on her shoulder. Martin's face contorted with fury, saliva spitting at the edges of his lip as he snarled, Get away from my daughter, you stalker! I'll have you arrested. Malcolm's grip on Lena's shoulder loosened only enough to let her see he was still there, still her protector. He squared his shoulders and hit his phone's emergency button. This is Malcolm Gaines at Crest Hill General. We need hospital security and local police in the maternity wing. Code yellow. A man is threatening to harm a newborn. His voice rang out with calm authority, each word precise, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Martin's eyes flickered with panic as he saw Malcolm dial. He cursed under his breath and spun toward Lena's mother, who stood stunned by the doorway, baby Monica clutched in her arms. The woman's ashen face crumpled. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized her husband's volatile nature had nearly shattered their fragile new family. Moments later, heavy footsteps approached. 2 burly hospital security officers and a uniformed police sergeant rounded the corner. The sergeant's presence was commanding. He barked, "Sir, step away from the child," as the security officers moved in to flank Martin. Lena pressed herself closer to Malcolm, burying her face against his side with a whimper. The sergeant grabbed Martin's arm, twisting it behind his back. "You're under protective custody for making threats against a minor," he informed Martin. "We'll escort you to the station for questioning." Martin spat and glared, but he dared not struggle against the firm hold of the officers. Malcolm knelt down beside Lena's mother, offering a gentle smile. "Are you both all right?" he asked quietly. Lena's mother nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks as she held Monica close, the newborn's tiny chest rising and falling in delicate rhythms. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. "Thank you for bringing her birth record and for being here when we needed you." The sergeant moved Martin toward the elevator. As the steel doors closed behind them, Lena's mother and the hospital nurse escorted Lena and baby Monica to a private family room down the hall. Malcolm lingered in the corridor, heart still racing as the nurse turned to him. You did the right thing, she said softly. This little one needed someone to advocate for her. He exhaled, the tension ebbing from his shoulders, but the weight of fatigue and emotion pressed down on him all the same. Lena peeked around the door of the family room, her tear-streaked face lighting up when she saw him. She ran over, clutching his hand. "Thank you," she said, voice quivering. "You saved my sister." Malcolm knelt to her level, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "You both have a family who loves you," he replied, looking gently at Lena's mother as she re-entered the doorway. "And you're safe now." He stood, offering both women a respectful nod. As hospital security led Martin away on a wheelchair bound by cuffs, Malcolm slipped outside the wing to find a quiet corner. He dialed Margaret on his personal line. "It's done," he said, voice low. "They've taken Mr. Brooks into custody. Lena and Monica are safe, and the medical teams started preparing for baby Monica's corrective surgery." Margaret's relieved tone crackled through the speaker. "Malcolm, you did more than your duty tonight. Take the rest of your shift off, and call me in the morning." He smiled, exhaustion and relief mingling in his chest. "Thank you," he murmured, tucking his phone away. By 3 a.m., the maternity wing had settled into a quiet lull. The soft glow of night lights, the rhythmic beep of monitors, and the muted hush of nurses making their rounds. Malcolm stepped out into the lobby, blinking as the antiseptic glare of the hospital embraced him. He paused at the automatic doors, inhaling the cool night air, and glanced back at the building that had, tonight, been both fortress and battleground. He thought of Lena Brooks, 9 years old, carrying a sister she loved so fiercely she risked everything to protect her. He thought of Monica, fragile and brave in her basket-like car seat, her tiny hand curled around a blanket that once bore the stain of fear. And he thought of Martin Brooks, the man whose own fury had nearly cost his child her life. As the first pale light of dawn began to touch the horizon, Malcolm Gaines slipped away from Crest Hill General Hospital. He returned to the station in his mind, to the silent platform where it all began, where a weary clerk became something greater, a guardian of the helpless in a cold world. And though his shift would start again in mere hours, he knew that sometimes the call to do what's right doesn't wait for the clock to strike the hour. Sometimes it demands every last beat of your heart and everything you have. The sterile hum of the monitors filled the heavy silence as Lena's mother's words trembled in the air. Officer Johnson exchanged a brief glance with the nurses and the other officers in the room. He cleared his throat softly before turning back to her. "Mrs. Brooks," he said gently, "thank you for sharing that with us. We'll make sure you and your children are safe. I'm placing your husband under arrest for attempted abandonment and threats against the children. You have nothing to fear now." Martin sat in cuffs on the edge of a folding chair by the door, head bowed. Lena's mother rose, pulling her daughter and the baby into a trembling embrace. Malcolm stepped back respectfully, giving them space, though his heart clenched at the sight of their relief. Officer Chen knelt beside Martin, producing a small notebook. "Mr. Brooks, I'm going to read you your rights," she said, voice steady but cold. As she began the Miranda warning, Martin's shoulders slumped further. Lena peeked over her mother's shoulder, eyes wide, but no longer fearful. She clutched her baby sister's hand tightly, Monica's tiny fingers curling around Lena's with surprising strength. Once Martin was escorted away by 2 officers, Officer Johnson returned to Lena and her mother. "Is there anyone you'd like to call? A family member or friend?" he asked kindly. Lena's mother nodded, fumbling for her phone. As she dialed, the nurse guided her toward the corner of the room, setting up a fresh blanket for Monica and unwrapping the baby to change her into clean clothes. Lena watched in fascination as the nurse's practiced hands swaddled Monica in a soft pink blanket. Malcolm lingered near the doorway, unsure whether to stay or leave. Lena caught his eye and offered a small, grateful smile. He stepped forward slowly. "Lena," he said softly, kneeling beside her mother's chair. "I just wanted to make sure you both got back safely, and—" He hesitated, glancing at Monica in her mother's lap. "To tell you that I'll keep checking on you until you're discharged. You're not alone anymore." Tears brimmed in Lena's eyes as she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Lena's mother looked up, gratitude shining through the exhaustion in her face. "We can't thank you enough, Mr. Gaines," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved my children tonight." Malcolm shook his head. "I just did what anyone should do," he replied, though his chest swelled with pride. Officer Chen approached, still holding her notebook. "If you need anything, just press this call button," she said, handing Lena's mother a small device. "We'll be right here." Once the mother and children were settled, Malcolm stepped back into the corridor. The night air outside the ward felt quieter now, the storm of chaos having passed. He paused by a window overlooking the hospital's landscaped courtyard, moonlight painting silver patterns on the pavement below. His phone buzzed in his pocket, Margaret checking in. He tapped out a brief message: family safe, Martin in custody, returning to station soon. He slipped the birth record carefully into his vest pocket once more, a tangible reminder of how far he'd come, and how close he'd come to losing 2 lives that night. As he made his way back to the station, he reflected on everything he'd seen: the terror in Lena's eyes, the desperation in her mother's whispered confession, and the cold fury that had twisted Martin into someone unrecognizable. He thought of the subway platform, the flickering lights, and the way a single clerk's decision had altered the course of an entire family's life. By the time he stepped back into Crest Hill Station, dawn was just beginning to pale the sky. He punched in at the employee kiosk, exhaustion tugging at every muscle, but he felt lighter than he had in weeks. He'd honored his duty, and then some. Margaret met him at the foot of the stairs, concern etched on her face. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. Malcolm offered her a tired smile. "Better than okay," he said. "They're safe, and that baby, she's got a chance now." Margaret nodded, pride shining through her worry. "You did good tonight. Why don't you get some rest? I'll cover for you until noon." Relief flooded Malcolm as he finally allowed himself a deep, steadying breath. "Thank you," he whispered. He strode toward the staff room, the early morning hush of the station wrapping around him like a soft blanket. As he closed the door behind him and sank onto a worn couch, his thoughts drifted back to 2 small sisters and the fragile bonds of family. He knew this wasn't the end of the story. There would be court dates, perhaps even therapy sessions for Lena, and months of medical care for Monica. But for now, the crisis was over, and that was enough. Malcolm closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him toward sleep. In the quiet aftermath of a night that had tested every ounce of his courage, he felt something new unfurl inside him, a belief that one person, even a lone subway clerk, could indeed make all the difference. Malcolm paused at the top of the subway stairs, breathing in the damp night air. Behind him, the station lights glowed like beacons guiding lost souls home. Ahead, the platform lay quiet, its yellow safety line still faintly illuminated by the lone overhead lamp. He adjusted his vest, the weight of the night's events settling heavy on his shoulders. In the stillness, he could almost hear the echoes of Lena's brave confession, the frantic echo of newborn cries bouncing off the concrete walls of the basement parking lot, the thud of police boots as they restrained Martin Brooks. Each moment had played out like a scene in slow motion, yet now it felt impossibly distant, as though part of someone else's dream. He descended the last few steps and crossed onto Platform 1. The digital display above flickered. No more trains would arrive until morning. The silence was so complete it felt tangible, pressing in on him from every side. Malcolm took a steadying breath, closed his eyes, and allowed himself a moment of reflection. A life saved, a shift redeemed. He thought of Lena's face, eyes wide with fear, then flickering with relief, and of baby Monica nestled safely in her mother's arms. He pictured the tear-streaked confession of Mrs. Brooks as she described her husband's cold betrayal and the way Officer Johnson had turned that sterile hospital room into a sanctuary of protection. None of it would have happened if Malcolm had stayed behind the ticket booth. Instinct, guilt, and something deeper, perhaps the memory of his own loss, had driven him into action. Returning to duty, with his decision made, Malcolm slipped behind the information booth, logged back into the kiosk, and flipped on the lights. The headset felt heavier now, but in a comforting way, a reminder that there would be questions to answer, reports to file, and passengers to guide safely home. He straightened his name tag and tapped the console to check the next day's schedule. A couple of early risers drifted onto the platform. 2 night shift nurses chatting softly, a lone commuter heading for the 5:02 a.m. train. To each, Malcolm offered the same steady courtesy he always did. "Good morning. Last train's in 10. Please stand behind the yellow line." An unspoken promise. His phone buzzed with one final message from Lena's mother. "Thank you again, Mr. Gaines. You gave us our family back." Malcolm smiled, tucking the message away. He didn't need more praise. Her words would echo in his mind through every long night to come. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the east end of the tunnel, Malcolm allowed himself a quiet thought, that today, and all nights after, he would carry the story of 2 brave sisters with him. He would remember how a single act of courage, and a few crumpled dollar bills shared with a stranger, had changed everything. The night shift's promise. In the world of the night shift, anything was possible. A routine evening could spiral into tragedy or become the stage for heroism. And though Malcolm would keep steering trains and guiding passengers, he knew now that his true calling lay in the spaces between the schedules, in the moments when someone needs help most and no one else is watching. He straightened his radio, preparing for the quiet hours ahead. The station was his domain until the sun rose again, a place where vigilance and empathy mattered as much as timetables and ticket fares. And somewhere in the soft glow of the tunnel, a little girl and her baby sister were sleeping safely, their lives forever intertwined with the humble subway clerk who refused to look away. Malcolm Gaines tapped his microphone. "All clear on platform 1. Let's keep it that way." And with that, he returned to his post, ready for whatever the night would bring next.